I want to talk about the quickest ways for someone to get into an RN program. I'm going to talk about 3 common paths. One's going to be for someone starting from high school. One's going to be for someone going through a degree change. You're already in college, you're trying to change your degree. And then the third one will be you're already in the workforce and you're looking for a career change into nursing. Where is it that you begin? So we're going to dive into these, friends. I'm going to kind of paint the picture for each one. There's going to be some similarities through each scenario, but they're all slightly different. And I just kind of want to walk you guys through, put myself in the shoes of someone, in each of these positions and how I would kind of approach it and what I would do. And this is all just in the general sense. Everybody has their story. Everybody has their own unique situation. But for the most part, this is just a picture. If I put myself in the shoes of this person in each of these scenarios, this is what I would do. And hopefully some of it is helpful, just for me looking back and having already made it as a male nurse. So let's begin. Starting from high school. So for the big one, for this one, I would say you're starting off with a clean slate, right? You just graduated high school, you have a clean slate, you're wanting to become a nurse. What would I do? So for me, friends, my path, I would do it exactly the same way. This was exactly my path when I decided to become a nurse. Right. I eventually decided to change from wanting to become a police officer, but I did it early enough where it didn't affect anything. So the way I would start would be I'd go to a community college. I would go for 2 reasons. 1, you save a lot of money. And 2, it's actually easier to get into the classes that you need at a community college. And I'll explain. So when you go to a 4-year degree school, right? Very popular, very big campus. There's a lot of students there. Not only is it more expensive, but it's also quite competitive, not only to get into the nursing programs, but it's also competitive to get into the nursing program classes that you need as prereqs to get into the program, if that makes sense. Like everybody's trying to get into anatomy, everybody's trying to get into physiology, microbiology, statistics. Like not only is the program impacted, but it's also very difficult to get into those classes as prereqs. And because of that, I say it's actually way better to go to a community college. I'm a very big advocate for that. Just be careful though. The one downside is that people can get stuck at a community college. You lower your mindset a little bit. You lower your drive a little bit. When you go to community college, because you look at everybody around you and everyone's kind of like lost a little bit. Like, I'm kind of half foot in, half foot out. But if you go in, friends, and you know what it is that you want, right? Which is to go to a 4-year, and you just every day you go in, you're like, I'm only here temporarily. I'm only here temporarily. I'm only here to get these prereqs and dip. Like you'll be fine. That's kind of what I was telling myself the whole time. And you kind of have to do that. So that's the one downside by going to a community college. But the plus side, it's way cheaper and it's easier to get into these classes. So if I was starting from high school, I'd go to a community college. I'd save money, get into my classes. I'd give myself about 2 years to 3 years, right? And then I'll kind of explain that at the end of this. But I'd give myself a picture of 3 years, setting up each semester so I take all the prereqs that I need, right? Well, what are the prereqs? Well, when you're looking into nursing schools that you want to get in and you want to cast a wide net, you want to look at so many. For me, I live in California. I was looking at pretty much all the schools in California and just kind of looking at what classes I needed. And you'll find out for the most part that most of them all require the same ones, which are like anatomy, physiology, microbiology, chemistry, statistics, English, public speaking, anthropology, all these different types of classes, but they all for the most part overlap, right? I think there's a website called like assist.org or something like that. I'll have to look it up. But you can see if one of your classes transfers over to your other school or something like that. I'll have to look it up for you guys, and maybe I'll put it in the comments down below. But I would start at community college. I'd take the prereqs that I need. When I'm in this getting closer to applying for the schools, I'd go and take my TEAS test, and I knocked out everything I needed to get done, to get into a nursing program. But like I said, this is going to be about a 2-year window at least. For me, it was 3 years, and that's kind of what I wanted to share. I really try to focus and set each semester, methodically. So I gave myself the best opportunity to get an A. I didn't do myself any injustice and take like microbiology and chemistry in the same semester, because those are 2 really hard classes, right? I did like anatomy with like an easier English class and like health, right? And each semester, I strategically just set it up so I can get an A in that class that mattered. And well, what are the classes that matter? The classes that matter are those that I listed earlier: the anatomy, the physiology, the microbiology, the statistics, chemistry. Those are the ones you really want to get the best grade in. If you can get an A in those, that'll only help you get into a competitive school. And then just to backtrack a little bit, right? Which schools am I looking at? Because you're starting from high school, because you have such a fresh start, a clean slate, and you have time, friends. If you're starting from high school, you're probably 18 years old. I would even say this whole first, path, I would do this exactly the same way for anyone starting from like the age of 18 to like 22. The same exact path. Even if you're starting at 22, let's say you went into the military and you're coming out at the age of 22 or so, I would do this path the same exact way. Because you're young, you have time on your side. You don't have the responsibilities of paying a mortgage most likely, or providing for a family, or being there because you're married for your partner. Your responsibilities are going to be lowered now, at the lowest point in your life now, than they'll be later on in life. So my point to that is aim high. Aim for those schools with the bachelor's in science and nursing degree. Aim for the BSN at this age, just from the jump. Aim for that. And then if you can't get into those BSN schools, that's when I would go to an ADN. And then, yes, if you get impatient and you're, a little older now, 23, 24, and you can't get in, it's up to you, but then you can start to look at private schools. But I say aim high because you have the time. If you don't get in the first time, retake a couple classes if you didn't get an A, right? Retake your TEAS test if you didn't get a great score, right? If there's ways to fluff up the point system for yourself, go become a CNA. Take a Spanish class or an alternative language class. Find ways to kind of prop yourself up and get the grade and, those points that you need to get into a program because you're young enough. You have the time. So just as a recap, right? I decided to go to a community college, right? I decided to aim for BSN nursing programs. I got my TEAS done. I'm ready to apply, right? I got my prereqs done. I'm ready to apply to these programs. When you go to apply, one thing you have to keep in mind is you have to apply to the four-year school, and then you also have to apply to the nursing program. It's just one little thing that confused me too when I was, going into applying for the programs. I was like, do I apply for just the nursing program or do I have to apply to the school? Most often, from my experience that I've seen, is you have to apply to the school first because the application period is first, and then you later apply for the nursing program. And just because you get into the school doesn't mean you have to go into the school if you don't get into the nursing program. The schools kind of understand that you're applying to the school because you're trying to get into the nursing program. But just make sure you apply to both. But a bigger tip would be, once you're at that stage, find a counselor for each specific school that you're applying to. If you have any questions, they will kind of hold your hand and walk you through that process. But otherwise, that's just like a clear-cut way to kind of look at it and just to keep that in mind whenever you're at that stage. So like I said, friends, my biggest tip that I wrote down, and I kind of already touched upon it, stay on the public side of things if you can. A public side. So a public BSN school, a public ADN school. Stay on the public side if you can. Once you start going private, things get a lot more expensive because you're paying for convenience, and I could totally understand that, right? And we'll get into that later on in the other, pathways. But because you're so young, give yourself a little bit of time. Don't get impatient right away if you don't get in the first 2 times or so. Give yourself a little bit of time because you'll save yourself a lot of debt if you can manage to get into a program in the public sector. Public schools save you a lot of money. Private schools are more expensive, but you're paying for convenience. You definitely are. And as far as time frame, what I wrote down is from my own personal experience. It's also from seeing other people around me. But it takes about 2 to 3 years in this pathway to get into a nursing program. 2 years if you're fully in stride, 3 years like myself if you don't get in the first time or so, right? You have to apply again. I applied 2 times and I got in on the second time. But I applied to multiple schools 2 times. And on the second time, that's when I got in. And it took me about 3 years. I started nursing school right at the age of 21, right when I turned 21. So just for perspective. So that was starting from high school, right, friends? Now I want to talk about for those having a degree change. What does that look like? So I'm going to put myself in your shoes, right? Let's say I went for a psychology degree. That was a very popular degree when I was in school, and I think it's still a very popular degree now. But let's say I was like, you know what? Change your heart. I don't want to, go into that path. I want to become a nurse instead. One thing you're going to want to do is, first off, is look at nursing programs, right? And this is also with the consideration that you're still fairly young. So there's going to be some similarities to the first pathway, right? For someone starting with a clean slate. Because I'll say maybe because you caught yourself early on enough that you haven't really, gotten too deep into only psychology courses. And even if you have, it'll still be okay, right? It doesn't really change too much from the first path. But take a look at nursing programs, see what nursing programs require, what classes they require, and that's kind of your starting point. Take a look and see if any classes that they require you've already taken. If you got A's in them, better, awesome. Forget about it, you're good on those. If you haven't gotten A's in those classes, consider retaking them just to kind of increase your GPA. Otherwise, take a look at all the ones that you still have left and go ahead and start to begin to take those. And, like we said in the first pathway, cast a wide net, cast a wide variety of schools you want to get to. You're going to see a common theme of school classes required and start to kind of knock those out. So you're not too far behind from the first pathway. You just got to get these prereqs out the way. And then when you're done with that, get your TEAS test out the way, study for that, take it, and then now you start applying to nursing programs. And similar to the first pathway, I would say go ahead and try to stay on the public school track. Try to aim high as well, going for the BSN first, and if you don't get in, maybe you can explore the ADNs now, and then if not, go private sector. That's kind of how I rank it. But try to stay public, because like we said, you'll save money. It's a little bit more difficult. They're impacted. They're challenging to get into, right? And that's why private schools are very enticing. But because you're still pretty young, give yourself some time. Try to, give yourself an opportunity to save some money, save the debt, and go public if you can. And as far as time frame, friends, I would say this is fairly similar to the first path, because maybe you only lost 6 months, maybe you only lost a year, maybe you lost a year and a half. I don't think you would have lost too much time with a degree change. So because of that, it'll still take around 3 years or so, maybe 4 years if were too far into your prior degree. But it shouldn't really have hurt you too much in the long run. You're still going to be pretty young, maybe 3-4 years or so. And if you caught yourself early on enough, maybe just 2 years or so total before you can find yourself in a nursing program. So that's this second pathway. So where things start to get interesting, and this is where, the floor starts to open in terms of options. And this is for those looking for a career change. And the first thing that comes into mind is for those people that straight out of high school got into the workforce, right? They didn't go to school. For you, it gets interesting because, you have a clean slate. Maybe you haven't taken any college classes, right? But now you're older. Maybe you feel behind. So that's one scenario. And the other scenario that I think of is you've been in the workforce. You have a degree, right? Maybe you're in your 30s now, or maybe you have a family. Maybe you have a child. You have other obligations, right? You feel behind. You're older. Time has passed. And I'm not saying it's too late for either of these. I'm just kind of painting the picture of what a scenario within this career change might look like. So if I had to put myself in your guys' position, what I would do is just really consider what my options are. What does time look like for me? How quickly do I want to get into the program? Do I have some time still? So if you have time, I still highly encourage you to go the public school route. Try to aim for the BSN if you can. But I can totally understand, right, that the public school might take more time. It's competitive. It's impacted. It's not as like a straight through shot. And being older in age, it might be harder to consider that. It might be easier for you guys to start to go into the private schools, right, options. Because the private schools, you're paying for convenience. You're paying to save time. Sometimes they bundle up the prereqs into the program. It'll cost more. It really just depends how much you value your time, right? To put a price tag on time is really, subjective to ourselves, right? Some people are willing to get down in the gutter per se and just get back into the community school of things, get those prereqs, work part-time, make some money, and go to school and grind it out, right? Other people are like, I saved a little money. Let me go into a private school and get done as soon as possible. Let me try to finish in 3 years, get in, get out, get into the workforce, right? It's all just subjective. It really just depends. So again, I'm just painting pictures. That's all I'm doing right now. So just starting with the public route, right? Let's say you decide to go that path. You're going to have to take some prereqs. I still encourage you to go to a community college, get your prereqs done there because it'll be cheaper. Going to a 4-year will only just make it more expensive for yourself, and again, only make it harder and potentially take longer to get into classes. So definitely still go community college to get your prereqs. You'll still need your TEAS, and then from that point, when you're ready to apply to schools, this is where the choice is really up to you. Do you want to apply to public schools or do you want to apply to private schools? And this is the real pivot point. This is where really everybody has to make the decision for themselves, which one works best for them. Are you okay with taking out some debt, but going into the private school, getting done sooner, getting in, getting out, or going the public route, right? Which is, a less expensive option, but the time frame, it's hard. You're older now, time has passed. Maybe you don't have that convenience of being able to wait, right? But if you do, go the public. If you don't, I'd say go private. But just consider the fact that one has a price tag that's higher than the other, and one is a lot less expensive. But the time difference is noticeable. And now when you're looking at private schools, right? Let's say you chose the private school route. They have second degree nursing programs. I've seen those. You might want to explore those. And if you're going the private route, make sure you look at the difference in price between a BSN and an ADN. I say if you're already kind of going to a private school to become a nurse later in your career, you might as well want to consider just getting the BSN. Because if you get your ADN, you may still want to get your BSN later, and you're older now, so would you really want to go back to school? So just kind of weigh those options. There might be a pretty significant price difference, but if there's not and it's worth it to you, it might be worth getting the higher level degree. But friends, I think that is it. Hopefully some of this was helpful. I try to paint 3 different paths, from someone starting from high school, someone having a degree change, and someone having a career change. They're all different. Everybody has their story. What is your story? It's going to be unique to you, but there's some similarities. I've seen a lot of different people as a man become a nurse with their own different pathway. There's no direct line. So when you guys reach out to me and tell me your scenarios, I see them, but I see very common themes. People starting from the very start, some people having a change of heart, and some people having a change of heart in their career. So hopefully some of this was helpful. Hopefully it's relatable. But as always, friends, I'll see you here every Monday as I continue to upload and continue to show up on here and try to provide some value, some knowledge, things that I would have found helpful when I first started this journey.